and welcome to another episode of Bill Has Opinions. I am Laura Lavoie. I am joined by Bill Perkins, who has opinions. And today, we're talking about a lot of stuff. All right. How are you, Bill?
I'm doing okay today. Yeah, it's the weather's pleasant and yeah, I don't know. Things are good, I guess. I went and voted today.
Hey, good job.
Yeah. The lines were actually relatively long for early voting at 7 in the morning. You know, I got to say that. So yeah, we'll talk about that again a little bit later, maybe. But anyway, just a thing that happened.
No, yeah, it's a lovely day here in Atlanta. It's still hot because Atlanta, it was 80 degrees today, so I can do without that, but it's beautiful. And yeah, I've had a crazy day. I've had a good day. Nothing bad has happened, but a crazy day. All kinds of weird stuff.
Ooh, spooky.
Ooh, spooky. Not too spooky. But here's just a real quick story. Real quick. Yesterday, I had someone email me to try to sell me their virtual assistant business. Like, I need a virtual assistant, which I do not, because I do not need one. But in the email, he tried to personalize it, and he referenced my book, How to Drink Craft Beer, and he said, "You've piqued my interest," P-E-A-K-E-D. So I'm like, you know what? I don't need his services in any way, shape, or form. I'm going to email him back. So I emailed him. I told him that, I don't need this, blah, blah, blah. Also, I appreciate your interest in my book. It makes a great gift. And by the way, it's piqued, P-I-Q-U-E-D, not peaked. He emailed me back, and he wants to meet with me to do writing for his business.
He's going to hire you as an editor.
So, hey.
What? That's interesting. I'm not sure I knew that was the correct peaked, although I don't use that phrase a lot. So, but yeah, okay. It's peaked.
Yeah, well,
okay.
Peaked. You're interested. Well, so that's Grammar Corner of Bill Has Opinions. So
Grammar Corner. We're gonna have to start that segment now.
I've learned some other things recently that are interesting. The English language is very interesting. All right, so what are you drinking? What do you got to drink?
I'm starting off with a Boojum Brambleberry Goza, and I picked this because of its red color, and that was the closest tie-in I could get to tonight's episode. I really, ideally, would have a blood orange if I had it my way, but I'm at the mercy of what's on tap here at Purple Lane. And then I'm going to follow that up with a Kolsch. No, I don't know. I might follow it up. I've also got an IPA, a New Belgium Voodoo Ranger IPA I've got here.
Ooh.
I don't drink IPA, but it was. So there's that. So, yeah.
No, actually the best, and I couldn't get a hold of any of it but the best vampire beer I'm aware of is from Great Lakes Brewing. That is a Nosferatu, and it's an Imperial Red Ale, and it's really good. Strong, it's boozy. But you can't find it outside of Ohio. So yeah. I pre-gamed with an ESB, which is unexciting. And right now I'm going with the 1985 Voodoo Ranger. Right. Mostly because it had this spoopy skeleton 80s guy on the front.
All the Voodoo Rangers have a spooky skeleton guy on them. That's part of the thing. And I don't understand. So my friend Jay pointed out last time he was here that he doesn't understand like why they've got like a sub so New Belgium is the brewery, and then they've got this like sub brand of Voodoo Ranger underneath the brewery name that they call half of their IPAs, not all of them.
Right.
Which is really peculiar, but that's maybe something to talk about on another day.
It is. But later in the show, I do have my trusty Night Owl pumpkin. So
right.
because it's Halloween season, and I'm gonna drink all the pumpkin beers, even though they're really sweet, until I get sick and tired of them in like 2 weeks. So
I still haven't had that many because I can't find them anywhere. Like everywhere I go, they've got like Blue Moon and something like that, like, you know, Shiner, like all these. They just have macro ones. They don't have. I haven't seen any craft pumpkin anywhere, but maybe my luck will change on Saturday. I'm gonna go to the bottle shop and maybe find something. I don't know. We'll see.
Hey, worth a try. All right, today's show, vampires. I have been eagerly awaiting this show since we decided we were going to do it about 2 months ago. So Bill, I want to know, what's your general monologue? How do you feel about vampires?
You know, generally, I actually like. Well, I don't know if I like vampires personally. Like, I don't know if I'd want a vampire. You know what? Actually, okay. So here's the deal. If a vampire were to show up and he didn't want to kill me, if he wanted to make me a vampire, I would probably take that bargain. With the caveat, I've got to like do something with my hair first, because I understand that when you become a vampire, your hair gets kind of locked into whatever you're doing at the time.
Yep.
So you got to decide what you want to look like for eternity, right? Like that's the real thing there. If a vampire is going to come bite me, he should come do it now, because I'm kind of at my peak right now. I feel like I don't want to be. I think my mid-40s is probably about as old as I want to be. I don't want to be a 50 or 60-year-old vampire forever. Right now, this would be a good time to lock in while I'm still mildly virile. You know. Also, I have some questions, because it depends on the lore you read.
Correct.
Do vampires, aside from the drive to suck the life out of living things, do they have other drives? I want to know that. Like, if I'm going to lose, so vampires are sexy, but if I'm going to lose my sex drive, I don't know if I want to live forever like that. So that's a question I have going into it. You know.
Sure.
Yeah. I got a couple of questions. Oh, can they actually fly? I don't know. Or can they just jump really far? Either way, that's okay. I'm okay with it either way. I've not ever been able to fly, so if I could just jump really far, I'd probably take that also.
What about turning into a bat? Is that a deal breaker?
No, because I think that's bullshit. I think that's a modern invention. I think that's where we got twisted up, because we discovered we already had the idea of vampires, and then somebody discovered that there was a thing, a type of bat that sucked blood, right? Which lives in Central America, not in Eastern Europe. And so then they cutely called it the vampire bat, and then they decided, oh, vampire bat, let's just make that like part of the vampire thing, because bats are creepy and vampires are creepy. You know, and so I think that's what that is about, really. And I don't believe that a bit. I don't think they turn into bats. I mean, it's cute. It's cute in some of the movies or something, but you know, I really think that was a 1939 Bela Lugosi, Universal Monsters invention. The whole bat thing.
All right. So, question: if you turn into a vampire and you find out that vampires do turn into bats, will you be, or would you be like, hell yeah, I'm a bat now?
I'd be okay with it. Yeah. It's like just it's a bonus. I just don't believe it's a thing that they can do. They don't have a whole lot of hang-ups, which I like. You know what I mean? Like, oh, but this one will get me. I do love garlic, so that's going to be a hard thing to give up. Although I guess you don't really want food in general. So, yeah, but yes, the garlic thing, that might be, I don't know. That's the closest thing, that and whether or not I have a sex drive are the two biggest like deal breakers.
Well, depending on the lore you read or the fiction you read or whatever, any of those things are possible, or like some people do the garlic thing, some people don't. Some authors.
Right. Does it only work if I'm not invited in, right? Like if I go to a pizza joint and they say, "Sir, welcome to our pizza joint. I can order the garlic crust and I'm fine, right?"
Exactly. That is correct. That is correct. And also, viewers at home, remember, you can chime in. So if you disagree with our vampire opinions, we want to hear from you. But,
Yes.
So I think Anne Rice was the first one to really kind of give you that sexy vampire thing. She had like the brooding vampire, but then also the rock star vampire. And I think there was like that was a thing. But then like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, like, you know, so and then of course Twilight, which we will talk about later. But I think it just depends what universe in which you're a vampire.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I don't know how deep you want to get into it prior to station break. But I've got some theories on some of that stuff too about the changes in the lore, and I don't know what I like and don't like about the lore. So just let me know like when we want to get into. Yeah, I want to talk about what Heather's talking about right now too. Eventually here because, yeah. So do you want to do station break real quick?
Yeah, let's go ahead and do it so we can dive right the fuck in.
Can I duck over to the side for just a second while you do whatever you're doing for a sec, and then I'll be right back.
But yes, I will station break. I have a feeling this is going to be an interesting surprise. So, everybody, our station break today, we don't have anything to plug specifically, but what we want to tell you is please fucking vote. Go out there and vote. If your state does early voting, do that. If you're doing mail-in ballot, get it out as soon as possible. If you're doing a drop box, do that. Bill has confirmed that he has voted. He voted in line this morning and was able to make it through, make his vote happen. I dropped my vote out at the town hall, which if you don't know, in Georgia, all of our town halls are Waffle Houses. The town hall happens to be next to a Waffle House, so it looks like I'm dropping it off at the Waffle House. But either way, so vote. As I said last week, I'm going to tell you to vote for whoever you're going to vote for. Do that. Of course, I care who you vote for. I have opinions about who you vote for, but we're not going to get into that here, at least not in this episode, maybe in a future episode. But just vote. It's important.
All right. There. I was
back. Did you get a little more vampy while you were gone?
I did. I had asked my wife to drop off my vampy clothes prior to our broadcast, and she came in like 3 minutes in, and so I decided to use station break as an opportunity.
That's what it's here for.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
All right. So we've covered the voting. We tell people to vote, 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 vote. We're going to tell you that up until Election Day, so that's going to be our message coming up. But let's get back to vampires, which is, I like your napkin too. Vampires are a lot like voting. Actually, I can't really make that comparison work. I lost that joke somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. So, well, both of them can suck in a way, right? Not that, I mean, like the idea of having a choice is nice, but sometimes your choices both suck, and you have to pick. I don't know, like trying to decide how to make this allegory work. I don't know. I can't do the vampire tie-in on that. Sorry, I just can't.
Yeah, no. Heather got to the same place we did, so
okay. Yeah,
we got really our best choice here.
It's a necessary evil, and I guess a vampire might be a necessary evil. Maybe, I don't know.
Are they necessary? Are they evil? These are both questions we need to answer.
They are good questions. Okay, but so sorry. Before we were going into station break, we were starting to get into. Let's roll it back for a minute and let's talk about. Heather brought up the idea that the vampire is like a bloodborne STD allegory. And I would say also, additionally, the vampire lore in the story is almost kind of a warning to girls about predatory it was an idea towards young girls. It was like about predatory men, and I think the turning you into a vampire is, like allegorical to losing your virginity, becoming a spoiled, this is archaic bullshit. It's not stuff I buy into, FYI. I just want to clarify that. I like sluts. Own the word slut. I'm not saying that derogatorily. Own your sexual agency, ladies. Do what you fucking want to do.
If you want to go hang out with vampires, go hang out with vampires. That's what we're saying.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is, I guess back in the day, the patriarchy wanted to scare you into maintaining your maidenhood until such time that it became the property of your husband, and therefore vampires were sort of an allegory for the sort of spooky predatory men out there that would take advantage of you. I think that's part of it, right?
I think that's definitely a part of it. The specifically to the venereal disease situation is one of the most famous. So this is going to get both into fiction and lore, but it's a history of vampires. Obviously, there's a lot of lore about vampires, but specifically, one of the most famous vampires came out of a bet that was made between a bunch of people. It was the Shelleys, so Percy by Shelley and Mary Shelley, and George Gordon, Lord Byron, and his personal physician, Dr. John Polidori. They were like on this European vacation, and they were telling spooky tales to each other, and they challenged each other to write actual novels, like write a book, write a story about the scariest shit you can think of. The one that's become really famous out of that is not vampires. It's, of course, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. So she was like 18 when she friggin' wrote that shit, or when that bet was made. So girl was way ahead of her time.
Right. And invented a genre in doing so.
Exactly. But specifically, so Lord Byron started writing one, like I believe the main character's name is Varney the vampire, but he never finished it. But
Varney the vampire had a book that told him how to get girls.
Yeah, yes, but it was basically himself as a vampire, and Lord Byron was well known for his sexual exploits and the fact that he had syphilis. So more importantly is that John Polidori, a random doctor that happened to be on vacation with them, wrote an actual story where the main character was Lord Byron. He was named Lord Ruthven. And the story is about a descent into madness based on syphilis, except in this case, it's vampirism. So that is precisely how those things got equated with one another.
Right. And I actually have read Polidori's The Vampire with a Y. It's a pretty good story. As far as, I really appreciate it for the kind of the invention of, vampires had been lore obviously prior to that, but it was the first recorded, like somebody wrote down an actual book about a vampire, right? Like you could call it a book. It's a novella. It's a short story. I don't know how to explain.
Right.
It's pretty good. Then you've got Sheridan Le Fanu's Camilla, which, oh my God, that is one of the best vampire tales. I would put that in the top 3 at least of vampire tales I've read and seen adaptations of that I enjoyed. That's a really good tale. And then of course, I guess after there's another old vampire tale. I can't remember who wrote it now. There's another really old one from about the same time period.
If I do not have it on my list, but I literally came up with this list from memory. So
yeah, I should have gone and looked at my Amazon purchase list, because I really love Gothic horror, and I went through a phase where I read a lot of it. But then Bram Stoker obviously at some point probably he was probably about number 4 on writing a vampire thing, and obviously owned the hell out of it. He was the first person to write a long-winded one, because even Camilla is kind of a short story. It's not. I mean, it's a little bit longer than Pomodori's, but it's not quite Dracula. Yeah. So, and I want to back up a little bit because you were talking about the historical part.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about how the historical part influenced the fictional part in a way, which is, so there is a story. Now I can't remember what the last name was, but I sent you something.
Yeah, Mercy Brown of Rhode Island in the U.S.
Right.
Early colonial situation, or I guess colonial, but early.
The Mercy Brown was in Rhode Island, and in the early, mid to late 1800s. There was I think she probably more likely had tuberculosis, and everybody in the family caught tuberculosis after her. But because she died, and then like a week later, somebody else in the family fell ill, and then died, and then they suspected that Mercy Brown was a vampire and had risen from the dead to kill the rest of the family. And one by one, members of the family died, and again, it was probably tuberculosis. That's more likely, but
yeah, it's the coughing up blood situation. Like it was explainable stuff, but certainly terrifying when you didn't have a lot of medical science to explain it.
Right, and so it got written up in the papers as a case of vampirism, and I think they ended up exhuming the body of Mercy Brown and doing the traditional vampire thing where you cut her head off and burn the body and bury the head across the river and all that nonsense, which, FYI, guys, if you want to kill a vampire, that's the proper way to do it. You gotta really, really dispose of these. It's not just the stake through the heart. That will temporarily incapacitate a vampire, but it will not stop them wholesale. You have to separate the head from the body, burn the body, and bury the head on the other side of the river. Vampires apparently, most types of ghouls actually have some sort of thing against running water. I'm not exactly sure how that works. I don't know what the history of that is. Our resident librarian can look that up and let us know.
Heather, the third member of our show.
I'm sure she knows why the running water is abhorrent to the undead, but anyway, that's the proper way to dispose of a vampire if you really want to get rid of one. So that's what they did in the case of Mercy Brown, and this was written up in the newspapers like it was a real fucking thing. Like the newspapers were like, "This is a fact, right?" And I guess these newspapers.
And real quick, before you do that, the reason that they thought she was a vampire after they exhumed her body is all the other family members who had been buried were fully decomposed or in the process of properly decomposing. When they exhumed her, there was still blood in her heart, and they believed that was the reason that she was undead. But modern science says that was because she was in an above ground tomb.
I see.
Just something that happens.
Yeah. So anyway, the newspaper articles made their way back to. Oh, okay. So it goes back. Okay, that makes sense a little bit.
Little Greek mythology situation.
Yeah, it's weird how we incorporate all these weird things together somehow. And anyway, so these newspaper articles made their way across the pond, as you say, to Ireland, and Bram Stoker read it, and he said, I'll be damned. That's a very interesting story.
Right.
And he decided to write a story wherein he took the elements of the Mercy Brown story, but also decided to drag a little something from medieval history.
She got a lot more info.
Okay.
So that will be available in the comments for people that want to read it, because it's a lot of info.
I was only able to read a few words of that, but I do want to mention that, yes, part of the thing, the blood ritual of a vampire is sort of the converse of the blood ritual of the sacrament. The Jesus says, "Drink this. This is my blood." That whole thing. It's sort of like a satanic version of that. And it specifically, I think, in the Bible specifically says, like, you're not somewhere. Maybe you're not supposed to do these kinds of things. Like, you're not supposed to drink blood. The Jehovah's Witnesses, actually, to that extent, will not take a blood transfusion because of their interpretation of the Scripture, and they think it's a type of vampirism or something, or somehow unholy or anti-sacrament, and therefore they will let their family member die of blood loss instead of letting medical science save them, which is kind of batshit nutty. And we could have a whole episode on how batshit nutty religion can be. But there's a lot of things wrapped up in this vampire thing. It's probably like some mythology and some religion and some, folk tale. Some link to like you said, like syphilis or something. Like there's a lot of different things, a lot of different factors at play during the beginning of the industrial age that led to these tales becoming very popular. Anywho,
but with the history of vampires, you also have to look to a couple of historical figures, like not just Lord Byron, who was a womanizer with syphilis, but like obviously Dracula. There's strong ties to Vlad Dracul, the Romanian warlord person, which. He had some horrible stories, none of which were specifically about being a vampire, but those things kind of become the lore of vampires, like, nailing people's helmets to their heads and doing really cruel, torture on prisoners and things. So, it's just that sort of sadistic, psychopathic behavior that people attribute to vampires. And then after Vlad Dracul, at some point, there was Countess Elizabeth Bathory, who was also an interesting figure, but apparently one of the things she did, she's a legit human being that existed, but she would bathe in the blood of virgins to keep herself young. So that led to a folk version of her story.
Did she really do this, or is this just a legend about her?
I don't know.
Did Catherine the Great really fuck a horse, right?
Exactly.
Like people say these things, did George Washington throw a $50 across the Potomac or whatever?
Right, or did he chop down a cherry tree, or all those things.
Yeah. There's some tall tales around some of these figures. So I would say, yes, she's got a reputation for the thing you said, but I don't know how much I believe it.
But he definitely overtook this whoever she was for real. Like that's the story.
It's what we know about her, right?
Exactly.
When you say her name, I'm definitely like, yeah, that's the lady who bathed in the blood of virgins, whether or not I believe that really happened.
Right. So speaking of vampire lore, and there's just so much. When I was obsessed with vampires as a teenager, and I'm not into scary things, so I'm not obsessed with like the horror version. It was just like the history and the mythology and stuff, and I had a big book of vampires and all this stuff, and I was obsessed. But there are a couple of things that I think we should talk about before we talk about specific actual vampires or fictional vampires.
Okay.
Is the two main components of vampire mythology are how to make a vampire and how to kill a vampire. And those are very different depending on what versions you read and who's writing the story.
Right. So making a vampire, I guess in some lore, it's simply the vampire bites you, and then you die, and 2 days later you come back as a vampire, right? Which is probably, again, it's like it's a bastardization of the Christ story, right? Like the resurrection, but this time it's a dark resurrection, and you're a creature of the devil, right? And then you've got this newer version where the vampire has to bite you, and then on your first feed, you have to take back blood from the vampire. Am I right? Or you have to actually like feed. You have to feed before you're actually a vampire, right? So sometimes it's from the original vampire.
Yeah, there's a blood exchange that in a lot of versions of the vampire story, you have to have that blood exchange. Like they suck your blood and then you suck their blood, and it's all really sexual. And
but then sometimes it's just the first time you go feed. Like until you feed, like if you're killed before you feed, you won't be a vampire, right? Like you're just a walking undead for a minute until you find a victim. Definitely, you have to feed in some way, but sometimes you have to feed back from a vampire, and sometimes you have to feed on a human before you become a real vampire.
Right. Right.
Should we talk about
and I don't know, to be honest. I had to drink my vampire elixir.
We'll talk about the thralls later.
Right. But so, and I don't know what's actually, I mean, obviously it's vampires. Is it true? Like, that's the question, right? Do we legit believe in vampires? Does it matter?
I will ask the vampire at the point when I am presented with the gift of immortality. What actually is involved in the whole thing? This is more just
fair enough.
This is not a deal breaker. This is just a question. It's not I don't care one way or the other.
Well, I mean, if you are being made immortal, like at that point, you're like, well, just here we go. What are we doing? What do I have to do next?
Let me sort out the hair and ask my relevant questions, and then I'll deal with that part. You know, I think it makes more sense that you have to bite back from the vampire, because you wouldn't want every person who ever got bit going out and biting someone else and just becoming like, it becomes an exponential problem, right?
Exactly. That's why. So here's a funny story. When my husband Matt took the LSAT, which is the test you have to take to get into law school, there was a question on his particular LSAT that it got a lot of like buzz from that year, because the question was and I don't remember exactly, but it posed like, so and so thinks vampires are created when a vampire bites a person. Other so and so believes vampires are created when a person drinks the blood of a vampire. Blah blah blah. And because the LSAT is a logic problem, like it doesn't matter what the actual answer is. What matters is what's their argument for it and how do you come to that conclusion. But I think it's really interesting that the LSAT decided to ask the question, how are vampires made?
But definitely, if you look at it in terms of exponential, okay, so we're currently living in a pandemic, and the pandemic spreads exponentially. If vampires spread it exponentially, which they would do if all it took was a bite to create another vampire, then a vampire would create 2 vampires or 3 vampires or whatever. And then
every time they feed, and they're immortal, so it's literally infinite vampires.
Right. So we would have already reached the point where everyone on Earth is a vampire. So it makes more sense that you have to bite back a vampire in order to become a vampire. Otherwise, you just become a corpse. Am I right? Like that's what makes sense in a numbers game.
And in the idea and the concept that in the world where vampires are created by the exchange of blood, not just the biting, is if a vampire bites you and drains you of your blood, you're just dead. That's just it. That's you're dead. Nothing else happens. But if a vampire bites you and then gives you some of their blood, and in all the stories where that happens, that's done, very sexily, and it's like, oh yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
So then you only create the people, the vampires that you want. And in some versions that becomes like part of the draw of Interview with the Vampire was, Louis was lonely after becoming a vampire, and he created a vampire child, which is, I mean, that's all levels of fucked up, because the girl's like 10 years old forever. And
what she said, like that was part of the fucked upness, was that Claudia was And the vampires even viewed it as an abomination, right? Spoiler alert: if you're not familiar with the Anne Rice stuff, you probably need to turn off our podcast.
Right, because we will obviously get into that. So the second question, beyond making a vampire, though, is there's a lot of disparate information, a lot of completely different theories about how you kill a vampire. And you mentioned the cutting off the head and the burning and the burying and stuff. But obviously in a lot of modern versions, like Buffy the Vampire Slayer specifically, all you need to do is either catch that thing on fire or stab it through the heart and it dusts. It just becomes dust.
What about sunlight? Sometimes that kills them.
Sunlight.
However, even in Dracula, which is a really old version, he was able, because he was millennial old, almost, I guess. He was able to walk around in the sunlight. Obviously, his powers were diminished in the sunlight. He was less powerful, but he was able to be in the sunlight and walk around. And that's the case in some of the modern vampire tales, too. They're able to go out in the sunlight. They don't love it. Whereas in some vampire lore, they go out in the sunlight and instantly they're fried to a crisp.
Correct, yes. Yes.
So that's a thing.
That was a big plot point in the Sookie Stackhouse True Blood situation, where those vampires, if they went out in the sunlight, that's it, burnt to a crisp. Same with Buffy. You go out in the sunlight, you're burnt to a crisp. But then, of course, you come to a very modern version of the vampire, which most people say it's not a fucking vampire, is, of course, Twilight, where not only don't they burn in sunlight, but they sparkle for some unknown reason.
Right. So it gives them away when they're in the sunlight, which is still a detriment, because then there's an obvious difference here. What is this? What is this thing? Why are you different? Why are you sparkly?
Why are you a disco globe?
Yeah, it's kind of weird. Yeah. But and then you've got let's see. I'm trying to think of the ones where the vampires burn to a crisp. Fright Night, burn to a crisp. Blade, they burn to a crisp, right?
Yes. Buffy burned to a crisp. True Blood, they burned to a crisp. Being Human, which was both a British and a UK or an American series, burnt to a crisp. What We Do in the Shadows, I mean, it's a comedy, but I believe they burned to a crisp. They haven't showed that.
30 Days of Night, which was one of the better modern vampire stories. And when I say modern, I mean in the last 20 years. It was the first movie in 20 years where the vampire was a monster instead of a self-hating, hand-wringing romantic of some sort.
Right.
And
oh, yes.
I just want to take that minute. So since I said that, sorry, can we take a minute and just do a segue just on Anne Rice for a moment?
Yes.
I want to talk about Anne Rice because I both love and hate Anne Rice. Her take on vampires was unique and new. And this happens a lot of times when somebody has a new, unique take on something, especially when it's really groundbreaking. Okay. And she was definitely groundbreaking. And I do love her. I love the way she spins the tale. I loved her vampire tales.
Yes, they were. And that was what ignited my teenage vampire lust. Because it was right in that era,
Yeah. So she made the vampires more human in a way. Prior to that, you read, and this is one of the problems I had with the movie. The Francis Ford Coppola movie, Bram Stoker's Dracula, was made post Anne Rice, and they tried to make Dracula a bit of a romantic in the movie version, and I think it was completely retconned. Anne Rice before shit. I went back. I actually didn't read Dracula until after I saw that movie. I read Dracula several years later when I was going through a phase of reading a bunch of gothic horror stuff that I hadn't read in high school that I should have read in high school.
Yes, I did too. I did all that. Well, actually,
I read it, and so Dracula. So he's not Like he doesn't not think. However, he is a monster. Let's make no mistake. He is a monster in the story. He is a villain. He is a monster, and he's single-handedly like he's got one motive, and that is to dispense evil. Really,
right.
He's not like this person reminds me of my long lost wife or whatever, that nonsense. That was all Anne Rice influenced stuff. He basically sees what he wants and he takes it.
Right.
That's how he operates. He sees the character Mina. He says, now that's something I'd like to have, and so I will have it. It's not because she reminds him of some woman he loved back in 1600. It's because she's just something he wants to take, because that's who he is. And so that's the way vampires are. And then she flips the script on the whole thing, and I respect that, because I love the script flipping. I loved Wicked, and I loved Grendel, and all those kinds of stories where we take the villain and we make the villain like we take the story and say, well, wait, because the victor gets to tell the history, right?
That's right.
Say,
Exactly.
But what if we're telling this all wrong? And I understand that whole thing, right? Like, I get it, and I love it as a literary device. And I love Anne Rice for this reason. However, while her works solely were great in this regard, she, at that point, novels and Hollywood all decided, okay, this is what vampires are from now on. Like, she basically flipped the canon.
Right.
And that was the problem I had, was that there was no reason for the canon to reset, because she wrote something that was groundbreaking. But that's, I guess, what happened. That's the double-edged sword there. So while I love Anne Rice, I don't really love the progeny of Anne Rice, which I would say Twilight is one of, and Vampire Diaries, and a lot of that kind of stuff. Buffy, maybe, I don't know, a little bit Buffy.
Buffy is one of my all-time favorites, and I mean, yes, there is some of that, but I think it flips the script itself. It reflips the script to make, the damsel in distress be the badass vampire slayer. So
sure,
it did its own thing.
I get you there, but again, then it also still has vampires who are not necessarily villains.
They're dreamy. Right. So I have a surprise. I have a surprise even for Bill. Bill doesn't even know I'm doing this. Because there are so many vampires that we could literally talk about. I'm bringing back the idea of rapid fire, but I made a whole thing.
Okay.
So, all right, Bill, we're about to play the game, Vampire on Death Match. All right? You ready? Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Our first option, Dracula versus Count Orlok.
This is tough, because Orlok is basically a ripoff of Dracula who doesn't pay rights. However, it's a better telling in a way. If you're talking about Bela Lugosi versus Max Schreck, the Max Schreck one is scarier.
Yes.
So yeah, I'm gonna say Orlok.
All right. Okay. All right. So we got more. I got a lot more for you. All right. We're going some Buffy action here. Spike or Angel?
I'm going to let you answer this, because I didn't watch Buffy.
All right. I will tell you, Buffy is one of my very favorite things. And also Heather says Dracula for the previous question.
Okay.
All right. I've realized I can't bounce between the two things. All right. So I am a Buffy fan, but I prefer Angel over Spike, and a lot of other Buffy fans 100% disagree with me. Technically, I don't like either of them. I thought they were both toxic for Buffy, and that's a whole another issue. But all right, here's another one for you. Right. I mean, they're toxic, right? Because they're fucking vampires. They're not supposed to be good guys. All right. Here you go. Count Von Count versus Count Chocula.
Ooh, this is tough. I kind of thought this might happen, and on one hand, I'm gonna go with Chocula, because I don't particularly like math.
Ah, all right.
And I do like chocolate cereal.
This was impossible for me because I love Count Chocula. It is 100% my favorite monster cereal. But the Count Von Count was my favorite thing as a kid. I freaking loved the Count. So, all right, I got more for you. All right, here you go. Barnabas Collins, 1966. Barnabas Collins, 1991, from Dark Shadows.
I'm going with the original on this because I kind of hate Johnny Depp a little bit.
It's not Johnny Depp. This isn't the Johnny Depp version. It was the miniseries version from 1991 with Ben Cross.
Who? Okay, well,
this guy.
I'm still gonna go side with the original. I'm siding with that. Sorry.
Fair enough. I liked the 91 version. That was again in that era. I was in high school. That was my era of vampires. So I was a big fan of the 91 version. All right, here we go. Little Lestat versus Louis from Interview with the Vampire.
I like Lestat better. Louis too hand wringing and annoying. He spends too much time whining. I'm sorry. I don't like. I like Brad Pitt generally more. Like if you were to ask me, do I like Brad Pitt or Tom Cruise? I'd say Brad Pitt. But in this case, point goes to Lestat. This was one of the best castings of all time with Tom Cruise, by the way. Because when I first heard about it, I like Anne Rice. I believe with the initial casting. However, here's the deal: Lestat is a egotistical asshole, and Tom Cruise is completely capable of playing that person.
Absolutely. 100% I agree with that. All right, here's another one for you. I got a bunch. All right, Bill the Vampire versus Eric Northman from True Blood.
I liked Bill better. I just did. Here's the thing I got a problem with. Eric Northman, he was a Viking technically. Shouldn't he have had a beard? If you become a vampire, when you're bearded, you stay bearded. Ergo, Bill the Northman should have had a fucking beard and long hair because he had been bit years ago. That's my take on that. And I hate the casting, I guess is what I'm saying.
Fair enough. What I will give you about that particular show was that they took dreamy vampire to a whole new level with Alexander Skarsgård. So the Skarsgårds, right? Stellan Skarsgård has single-handedly populated the Swedish movie actor community with his children. And among them, the most attractive was Alexander. So people do love Alexander Skarsgård. All right, I got more.
I'm telling you from the standpoint of a vampire gets the hair locked in. He's a Viking. He would have had long hair and a beard, and he can't change that shit. That's how Vikings look. He would have looked like a Viking.
Fair enough. All right, we got some comedy vampires for you. Dracula Dead and Loving It versus Nandor the Relentless from What We Do in the Shadows.
I'm going to go with Nandor on this one.
I'm 100% Team Nandor.
Yeah. Not that I disliked Dracula Dead and Loving It, I haven't watched it over and over again or anything. It was funny for a minute. And I love Leslie Nielsen in a lot of things, okay? Like Naked Gun, I'm totally 100% Team Leslie Nielsen, but in this regard,
That's fair. I think that's reasonable. All right. I've got one for the ladies. Drusilla from Buffy the Vampire Slayer / Angel versus Nadia from What We Do in the Shadows.
I'll go with Nadia in this case because, again, I didn't watch Buffy, so I'm not attached to that.
That's fair. We've got also another vote for Nandor. I am a fan of both Buffy and also you should watch Buffy because it's really good.
But also, those shows that you told me I have to suffer the first season through though in order to like it.
Buffy. I think Buffy was strong from start to finish. I think
sometimes people tell you should watch this, but the first season's ass, and I'm like, no, I'm not watching that then.
Yeah, there's a lot of it. But no, Buffy, I think, was straight on, like just good through. I mean, there's obviously like any show that lasted 7 seasons, there's hit or misses, but in general, it's just good. Just genuinely good. All right, here you go. Here's another one for you. Animated vampires. Marceline versus Bunnicula.
I'm sorry, Marceline. I like Marceline a lot. She is hilarious and she's a cool cat. I don't know what to say. Like, she plays bass. She's awesome. Like, Finn, I know Finn kind of vacillates between whether he's crushing on Marceline or whether he's crushing on Princess Bubblegum, but I'm Team Marceline in that regard.
Yeah, but is she team him? That's the question. I admit Bunnicula was probably my first foray into vampires with the books, not the series, I was in elementary school. So I bought the celery stalks at midnight at one of those the book fairs.
Yeah.
And I loved it. I was like, this is amazing. This is incredible.
No, I'm with you there, and I loved Holiday Inn and all the other books in that series. However, I'm sorry. I love Marceline. It was one of the things that lured me into Adventure Time, which was a great series and just twisted and weird. It's a great cartoon, and she's a great character.
Excellent. All right, I got more. I only have 2 more, but we're moving into dreamy vampire territory. All right. Dreamy vampires. That's the category. Hold on, let me.
So.
True. So we've got Being Human UK versus Being Human US. Mitchell versus Aidan.
To answer this, I don't know anything about it. I guess I'd lean towards the British guy though, just because he's got longer hair and he's British.
Right, and most people will know him best as Keeley from The Hobbit. He was the sexy dwarf. So, and the other one is Sam Witwer. I don't. So I'm a big fan of the UK version. I didn't like the American version at all. So, again, if you're looking for something fun to watch the UK version of Being Human. All right, I got more. Are you ready? I got a last one for you.
Yeah, just Dreamies or something else?
This is the final Dreamy. It's also the final one we have all together. The final Dreamy vampires. We have the sparkly one versus the guy that was on Lost.
I like the guy who's on Lost. I didn't watch loads. So I'll say this. I didn't watch Vampire Diaries, but my wife and my stepdaughters watched Vampire Diaries, which meant sometimes I was walking through the room and Vampire Diaries was on. And that character, he really, I will say, and he was preferable to his brother, who initially was like a good vampire, but then flipped or something. And they did this whole this is one of the things I do hate about modern vampire lore is we have to have a love triangle at some point. Which that's also some of that's vampire and some of that's CW, and it makes me hate most series on the CW. And we can get into that at some other point because I've actually abandoned 3 or 4 superhero programs for the same reasons. Because once it gets to love triangle shit, I'm just like, I don't care. I'm not watching this horse shit anymore.
That is super CW. And one of my all-time favorite shows was a CW show, completely improbably a CW show. But one of their actual plot points, and it's made out to be a plot point, is a love triangle. And there's a song about it because it's a musical. So it's not vampires, but you should watch Crazy Ex-Girlfriend because it's my favorite.
Right, but yeah, it's a thing. It's definitely CW. They won't greenlight anything that doesn't have a love triangle. I think it's one of their contentions. You come in to pitch a thing, they go,
"Now have a love triangle.
Is there going to be a love triangle?" And you go, "Is that a thing I have to do?" And they go, "Yes." And you go, "Yeah, there will be."
But I will say that's also the shittiest. So I think most people agree Twilight is legit the shittiest vampire telling.
And the love triangle.
They had to have not only a love triangle, but the third point in the triangle. So it was vampire human and then a fucking werewolf for no reason.
Right. Although I think they decided at the last minute they weren't really werewolves. They were shapeshifters who took the form of wolves, which is some fucking horse shit, if you ask me.
Which is another show. But that's one of the things I loved about. Also, I agree with Heather. Lost but neither is actually a true statement in that instance. But and also, I have no idea what his character's name was, which is why I put that, because I've never watched it.
Was his name Damon or something like that?
I don't know. He's in Summerhalder. He was on Lost. That's literally all I know. Yeah. So, no, I had a point. No, I don't remember what it was.
I'm sorry. Okay. You were talking about. Hold on. Now, Twilight. Love triangles. Oh, shapeshifters.
Oh, shapeshifters. Yes. So specifically, because True Blood, right? True Blood, there was the book series that was kind of fun and dumb, and then they made the TV series out of it that was really popular, and then it went popular, like it was really good, and then all of a sudden it was really bad. But
there was that episode where they jumped a shark, and that's really where it went downhill.
Exactly. But so they have in that lore, there are shapeshifters and werewolves. Those are two separate things. But right. You could shapeshift into a werewolf. There were also other animals. So there was a character that was there was a were-tiger, and there was other were-animals.
And there were fairies also. So it was basically the lady who wrote that shit, whatever crazy shit she thought of that day went in that book. And it became increasingly hard to follow and stupid, and you were just like, holy fuck, I can't even with this nonsense.
Yes, that's where it got crazy.
I would say I actually read the first novel of that, and it was mildly entertaining. And it just got I remember whatever season it was where the season where I want to say it was the season ender or the season beginner where they summoned Lilith.
Mm.
And I was like, all right, I'm fucking out.
I'm out. I'm completely out. But I remember there was a meme going around when that was at its height of popularity. There was a meme if you were a were animal, what would you be? And I decided at the time that what I wanted to be was a were Sphinx cat. So because we had a Sphinx cat at the time, of course, people know Sphinx cats, hairless cats. I'm I would love to just be able to turn into a hairless cat. Then I'd be I'm weird and creepy, but also super snuggly. So that's unrelated to vampires. All right, we are running out of time, but we have some final segments to go through. So we are going to go over on this, but I'm glad we did our the vampire undeath match. But so mailbag, we do have a question from Heather in Minnesota. What is the best Halloween beer and why?
Pumpkin, I'm going to say. Who makes that? I can't remember the name, the brand.
Is that Southern Tier?
Southern Tier, Pumpkin, or Warlock. They're both equally good. It's a tie, but both are by Southern Tier.
Yes. And I have to say, my current favorite is the Night Owl, which is a pumpkin ale, but it is also very delicious. And they put an owl on it, so it looks somewhat spooky. So I like that.
Who put an owl on it?
Who? Who did? I'm going to legit answer your question because it's Elysian, but all right. Things that are extra. Bill, what is our things that are extra this week?
You told me something that was. Oh, I now remember. Yeah, deli meat that fakes out okay. So this is like deli meat. It's over in the already packaged section, but it's in a container and it's already packaged, but it makes out like it's like deli meat from the deli, and it's instead of being nice slices, it's just wadded up in the container. And so if say you get something like turkey, which turkey has got a weird cleavage situation. When you go to grab it, it just falls apart. It's like sawdust because it's dry. So you go to get it out and you're just tearing chunks of meat and it's just aggravating as hell. Like why do you want to deal with that shit? It's like we all know that like you already put this in the container at a factory somewhere. It's probably not even like straight up turkey breast. It's like pressed turkey breast. Like when you took 15 turkeys and pressed them back together into one thing. It's not like the real turkey breast over in the deli. So why fuck around with this, right? Like making it hard for me to make a sandwich out of it.
Right, and it's absolutely impossible because it's all wadded together. So you have to use two hands. So no matter what, you get both hands dirty. And then, like, sometimes it tears, and then you're like, how
not only do you get both hands dirty, but you also got both your hands in the damn meat.
Right, and then you have to wash your hands before you do anything else. Like, you can't then put mustard
and ideally, you wash your hands before you stuck them in the meat.
I mean, I thought that went without saying, but then you're like, you've got meat juices on your hands because you're like trying to pry the meat apart.
You stick them out and let the cat lick them.
That is an option. That is completely an option. All right. So that brings us out. We're right at 7:01. That brings us to the end of our show. Bill, will you take us away?
Yes. Bill Has Opinions is engineered and produced by Laura Lavoie. The opinions of Bill are those of his and he's alone. Those of Laura are also hers. Unless we agreed and we shook our heads in agreement. Tune in next time for an exciting episode of Bill Has Opinions. Don't forget to like and subscribe and all that good stuff. Leave hateful comments and send us emails.
Oh my God. I should just end it with that, but I can't bring myself to do it. So next week, join us for our Halloween episode, and we'll see you then.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody. It'll be very spooktacular.